The Charter Revision Commission and the public hearing is now officially open. I'd like to introduce the members of the commission. To my right is the Vice Chair, Jerry Petrini. We have Mary Roman, Yvonne Rodriguez, Steve Keogh, and we have Glenn Iannacone and Michael Witherspoon. And I expect that we'll have someone from the Corporation Counsel's office with us at some point. On January 12th of this year, the Common Council created the commission. And the resolution adopted by the council in pertinent part is that we are to consider the following 6 proposed changes. To extend the terms of the mayor from 2 years to 4 years, investigate the possibility of extending the terms of the council members, the town clerk, and other city officials to 4 years. If the mayoralty is increased to 4 years, consider term limits. Investigate the possibility of adjusting Board of Education elections to correspond with any changes. To remove references of selectman, city treasurer, and sheriff from the city charter, and to investigate the possibility to have the council members' compensation set by the Board of Estimate and Taxation. The commission has been directed by the Common Council to complete and submit its draft report on these proposals no later than April 5th, 2016. As the chairman, my understanding of what our responsibilities entail is to explore ways to create the best possible system for electing our mayor, Common Council members, Board of Education members, town clerk, and others. And this system needs to be one that we can comfortably and broadly embrace as citizens of Norwalk. And I want to assure everyone here tonight that the members of the commission are engaged in a broad and comprehensive fact-finding mission. People are really working hard, given the short window of time that we have. And it's our responsibility to not only collect information, but to listen to your suggestions and your concerns. And that's why I thank you for being here tonight. We want to become as knowledgeable a body as possible in order to provide the most comprehensive report to the council. Ultimately, it's up to the voting population of Norwalk to make the final decision on any proposed charter revision. Tonight, anyone wishing to speak, and I hope you've put your name down here, the criteria is to be a resident or a taxpayer of the city of Norwalk over the age of 18. There's a limit of 3 minutes each. And just for everyone, our next meeting is on February 22nd at 6:30. And I hope anyone would like to attend, please do. We expect to have at least one more public hearing. Finally, we welcome letters, information that you have regarding the resolution, and ask that it be addressed to the commission, the attention of Barbara Tisha, the legal secretary in the Corporation Counsel's office here at 125 East Avenue, 06851. We have Corporation Counsel Mario Coppola with us. So, having said all of that, Steve, you are the first speaker.
Thank you. I'm guessing it's just like every other meeting. My name is Steve Sarasis. My residence is 24 High Street in Norwalk. I am also on the Common Council and serve District A and the entire city.
Thank you.
My proposal is for a recommendation for evaluation by the Charter Revision is one that stands by itself away from the current proposals that are in front of you. I also would like to thank all of you for your service on the commission and for allowing me to speak. In today's, and just to clarify, I know Mario told me this is the way that I must make my proposal, and we will be having a Recreation and Parks meeting on March 10th where it will be drafted officially and presented to the commission. In today's economic environment and in our continued effort to find ways to increase dollars into our capital fund, I believe that we must explore every avenue possible to lessen the burden of tax on the taxpayer by increasing taxes. 30 to 40% of all vehicles are not registered in Norwalk, nor paying taxes for use of the resources provided by our Recreation and Parks Department. Therefore, I'm making the following recommendations to the commission this evening as a citizen and officially on March 10th through the Parks and Recreation Committee. The proposal is for the resident pass, the changes to the current city ordinance in regards to that. What we're proposing is, because a great percentage of cars are using our resources that aren't registered here and are paying taxes elsewhere, it's not a recommendation, before I go into what we're recommending, it's not a recommendation that's going to be taking money out of anybody's pocket. It's already money that they're paying somewhere else, registering their vehicles, whether it be Stamford, Greenwich, or wherever they are registered, yet living in Norwalk. And this is what we are proposing. I'm proposing at this point in time. Renters and homeowners. To obtain a Norwalk resident pass, the vehicle must be registered and taxed in the city of Norwalk and in the resident's name. Property owners. If you do not live in Norwalk, but own property in Norwalk, you will be entitled to 2 resident passes. Along with your registration, you will need to bring in your current Norwalk tax bill. The name on the tax bill must be the name on the registration to obtain the pass. Dealer and repair plates. Driver of vehicle must live in the city of Norwalk and present registration and 2 current utility bills in the resident's name, along with a letter from the businesses stating that you are the sole driver of this vehicle. That's the proposal. The final one that deals with dealer and repair plates, the reason it doesn't state in that particular piece that you must be registered in Norwalk and pay taxes in Norwalk is because repair plates are solely overseen by the state of Connecticut. So all those repair plates are basically paying their registration to the state. So that's why that last one reads a little bit differently. That's my proposal. It will be presented to the Recreation and Parks Committee on the March 10th meeting, and hopefully it will be moved forward and will be an official recommendation to the commission.
So that I'm clear, you're presenting this as a citizen, not as a member of the council.
I was told that that's the way I had to do it, by city council, I believe. Correct, sir?
Yes.
And that's why I'm taking this, I'm taking the complete legal way of doing it, and then approaching the committee with this afterwards. We have done, the research has been done with the help of the Recreation Parks Director, working directly with him and his department, and the number is valid. It's approximated, but it's definitely 30% of the cars to 40%. No, it's definitely at least 30%, maximum up to 40, maybe 43% of the cars entering our beaches and using our dump and everything else where you need the permit do not have their vehicles registered in Norwalk.
And you understand this goes beyond the resolution that we were given for the commission?
Yes, sir. I just feel at this time with the way the budget is, and they're toiling over who's going to get money, who's not going to get money, we're looking to increase the money for the BOE. We should think creatively on how we should bring money into the coffers without raising taxes, and I believe that this is one way of doing it without taking money out of anybody's pocket. It's already coming out of their pocket, but going to a different city.
Understood. Anyone have any questions?
I do.
Please.
Steve, I take it you've researched it through. This is not just a simple ordinance change. This is not a simple common council action. This has to go the full gamut to go to a charter revision in order to enact this.
Correct, sir.
Okay.
Actually, I've been doing the research and following this for the last 2.5 years. When I started, when I was volunteering about 200 hours a year to do all the concerts in the park I was doing the last few years on 3 nights a week, it came up then because when I originally put forth to do open mic night in Freeze Park and to do a concert every Thursday in different parks around the city, I didn't have a problem. But then when the Recreation and Parks Department asked me if I could help them bring vitality to the Tiki Lounge at the beach by providing them with performers that were at a reasonable price, I asked at that point, what about people that are coming into the beach just to see the show? And they told me that you have to pay the $5 like everyone else to get into the beach, which isn't much to see a good performer. But that's when it came up about the resident passes, which I wasn't aware of at the time. And I've been looking this over, researching it, and talking with them way before I was elected to the council this time around. And now that I'm on the council, it has given me the opportunity to be able to discuss it further with them and be part of the committee and actually get the research done.
Thank you. Steve, if I may, is there a particular portion of the charter that you're proposing to be changed so that we're...
At this point in time, I'm not ready to go in that direction because I want to keep this public right now. And when we present it to the committee on March 10th, we'll go forward from there in a more professional manner, listing which exactly piece.
You're certainly professional. It's just helpful to know which aspect of the charter. That's all.
And I know that Mike Mulcahy has that information. He would have been down here where we have 3 overlapping meetings right now. And excuse me, but after I'm done, I'm going to have to go to another meeting.
Of
I'm
course.
sorry, I have to leave this meeting.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for raising this.
All set? Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bill Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Long hours ahead of you over the next few months, I suspect. My guess is there'll probably be enough testimony tonight explaining the need for a 4-year term for the mayor. It's a track I've been around a few times and could expound probably more than you'd want to hear, and I will leave it to others tonight. There's another item that is in your list that you read earlier that is more troubling, well, not more troubling, but also troubling to me, and that has to do with the term limits that are suggested to be placed on the mayor's office once we go to a 4-year term, if in fact we do that. I find this troubling because having observed and participated in the business for a long time, I get the sense sometimes that the public feels that municipal improvements, maintenance of the equipment and procedures that we have, that advances in making the city more appealing to residents and to visitors are somehow a product of the tooth fairy, and that they come automatically, no matter who's in office. And that you vote a mayor in or out on the basis of how the taxes go. This, for better or for worse, is not the way it works. Some mayors get into office and just sort of let things go. This is particularly true if you're especially concerned about the tax rate. Other mayors get in for different purposes and have different visions, or have some visions, have willingness to spend political capital to improve the city in one or more different ways that are important to the future of the city. Let me mention, for example, school roofs. Some years ago, Mayor Knopp was elected, took office, sat down behind the desk, and had it explained to him that sufficient money had not been put in the budget for repairing school roofs for a very long time. And so for about 4 years, he was forced to commit his political capital, his budgetary capital, to bringing the school roofs up to date because previous mayors had let it go. Well, it's pretty hard for average citizens to know that that's going on and to make the judgment between good mayors and not so good mayors. Sometimes you can tell by performance in the newspapers who has vision and who doesn't, who has willingness to spend political capital on improving the city, who doesn't, and that sort of thing. But in fact, rather than a steady line of improvement in cities, it's a very jagged line. And it depends pretty much on how often a city gets someone in office who has the skills and the nerve to make things better. I think of City of Stamford, that was sort of dawdling along until Mayor Malloy got in office. Stamford is now a very progressive city to be commended, I think. He was in for 14 years. Had he been forced to leave at 8, Stamford would not be what it is today. Similarly, New Haven, Mayor DeStefano is a very progressive, forward-thinking mayor, and there was no term limit on him. And I don't know how long he was in, more than 8 years, and New Haven has made great progress. The mayor business is not one where inadequacy shows up usually. I mean, Bridgeport and Waterbury perhaps, but not necessarily where inadequacy shows up in the courtroom or that there's some terrible thing that happens and people know, oh, we better get rid of him. It's quieter, subtler, things that need to be done but are not done. And councilmen understand this because they get to see it. So I think it would be a mistake. It's not that often that any city gets a mayor who really knows how it goes and is willing to put risk his own political future and who has the vision to do what's right. If you want to vote him out, vote him out. But to have him automatically removed, and when I say him, I mean her as well, obviously. To vote that person, or to have that person automatically removed at the end of 8 years, I think does a disservice to the city because they don't come along that often.
I have a question. How would you feel about three terms as a term limit?
America's premier mayor, who's just now retiring, is Joe Riley, the mayor of Charleston, South Carolina. He has made Charleston into a show place, fiscally responsible, socially responsible, has led the U.S. Conference of Mayors in a number of progressive things. He started the Mayor's Conference on Urban Design. I had the honor of going to an early one. Joe is retiring after 24 years. I think Charleston would be much worse off if he had been forced to retire at any time. And I think if you get somebody who can handle it and has the vision and the will, I prefer not to have any kind of limitation. This is not the presidency of the United States. I understand perhaps the congruity of looking at term limits for the U.S., but any president has a lot of power, but we don't have to worry about having somebody turn out to be an Idi Amin or Hafez Assad or somebody like that. We can vote them out, and I don't see any need for any kind of limit.
Questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for giving me a chance to pontificate. I don't do it that often anymore.
Michael Geek?
Good evening. My name is Michael Geek. I live in District B at 39 Elmwood Avenue. I'm here to talk on two of the items that you were charged with investigating. The first being the term, specifically the term of the Common Council. Let me preface this by saying I have no intention of ever running for the Common Council again, so this will not impact me. I would suggest as a slight alternative that you consider making the council at large 4 years. It is much more difficult to run at large and much more expensive. Leave the in-district at 2, leave them more answerable to the specific district that they are representing. That would also give the at-large council members a little cookie for the fact that they've gone through the aggravation of running at large and getting elected at large. The other item is council compensation. And you mentioned that the suggestion was perhaps the BET set the set the compensation. Let me give you an alternative there. Right now, the mayor's compensation is set based on, I believe, the finance director's compensation. Make the council compensation based on the mayor's compensation. Some percentage from 100 down, divided by 15 to each council member. That way, you don't have to go through the exercise of the BET, the politicizing of the BET, and you don't have to have the compensation in the charter anymore. It's very simple. Plus, if you accept the premise that the two branches are co-equal, then it makes sense to relate the compensation of each. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Questions?
I have, I'm not quite sure what a percentage of the mayors divided by 15, is that what you?
Yes, you've got 15 members.
Right.
For sake of argument, say the mayor's paid $150,000, I know he's not yet, and you get 15 members. Any number from 10,000 down to whatever percentage of that you've chosen. But take it out of the charter because, as we've seen, it hasn't been changed in decades because it's very difficult to change. And take it out of the hands of a body that could politicize it. Just make it straightforward.
And also you said the 25% to each one? The 25%?
1/15, divide whatever part of the mayor's salary you've chosen among the 15 members.
All right. Got it.
So, you want it?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stuart Wells?
Is there anyone else that has to run to something else? So Wells, 224 West Norwalk Road, and speaking tonight, at least in part, and mostly, I guess, as registrar of voters and as what effect some of these ideas would have on elections in general. I have a packet for each of you up there. There's a spare for Corporation Council, and there are copies of the items on the table over there. I don't want to run through the whole thing because I include some ideas on if you do this, this would work better. If you do that, this other, and you don't have any proposal you're up to. It's too scattershot for that. But there are a few things I want you to focus on, or I'd like to suggest at this point. One of the ideas of taking the, what I would call, I don't know, for lack of a better word, the lesser offices or the unnecessary offices off the ballot is to shorten the ballot. And I think it would, you can't make it a single-sided ballot unless you also take constable off. Constable could easily be picked by the city council, mayor and council, or council, however you want to do it there. But there's not much point in voting for them when you're picking, you're voting for 4, 8 are nominated, and 7 are elected. Also, that's a lot of late night tallying for us. The results overall don't come out until awfully late because of that. And in general, it just would work better. You have a sample of the ballot there, you'll see that except for the numbers on the column, there's nothing that distinguishes one side from the other. We talk about the front side as being the mayor's side, but there's nothing that actually says that. So you can, and there are people that only pick up the back side and vote in, and don't get to the front side. It's not so simple. You could, but you could get a single-sided ballot, either 11 inches or 14 inches, if you got rid of constable off the ballot as well. So I would urge you to include them with the selectmen and the other sheriff and the treasurer. Yes. Somebody had emailed me or something and was talking about a 3-year term for things. Municipal elections under state law, and there's some packet of the laws there, although I defer to Corporation Council on any final answers on such. but municipal elections are every 2 years in the odd numbered year. So basically, trying to run them on a 3-year cycle is not exactly recommended. And so I don't think that's good. The other proposal I've seen is some sort of 1-year super election, off year. We either wouldn't have to have one or wouldn't have to have much of a one. We don't think that's a very good idea either. For one thing, you would still have the taxing districts in that off year. So you would still have to have an election for 5 of the districts. The odds are that you would have somebody who had resigned or otherwise left office, somebody who'd been appointed to do them, but I believe the law, or at least most of the towns that have 4-year terms for council and otherwise, will bring that office up for election at that second, after the end of the 2 years, if they resign in the first half of a 4-year term. And obviously not exactly at the half, it has to be when there's time to put them on the ballot. So you would only take one citywide such person to require either Board of Ed or council to end up with a whole citywide election anyway for that spot. This happened this last time in Stamford, where you had 3 or 4 of their Board of Representatives were up for election even though they have 4-year terms because they resigned mid-term. So that's the vacancy issue. So that's the 2 most important there. Also eliminating or trying to eliminate one of the municipal elections, or really cutting it down. It's going to have an extremely low turnout then. But also the municipal elections, because the turnout is less than the state and particularly the presidential elections, are when they try to phase in new ideas or new equipment to give us experience with it before a big presidential election. So a few years ago, when they phased in election day registration, they implemented it in the municipal year where the numbers would be fairly small, we could get used to doing it properly, and then there were a lot more the next time around for governor, and there'll be more this time now for president. There are many technical improvements as well as statutory changes that are on the horizon for these kinds of things, and if they ended up having an election where nobody was on the ballot much and hardly anybody turned out, you lose all the benefit of that. Plus, it's very hard to train poll workers under those circumstances. None of them want to work when nobody comes to vote because it's a very long and boring day. Now, admittedly, some of them complain in presidentials because it's a long and very busy day, but there's nothing perfect. But nevertheless, trying to have a very low turnout election is not, we think, a very good idea. And it does happen. You see on the chart I have there, one of the Hartford off-year elections, they got like a 5% turnout, and that's solely, well, Hartford has the additional problem in turnout that the primary tends to be the whole act, as often is the case in Bridgeport as well, so that makes it worse. But you'll see one of those recent years in Hartford, they only had a 5% turnout because the mayor and the council were not on the ballot then. You really do get very low numbers. And lastly, on that point, how do we go to the high schools and tell kids to register and vote? Yeah, but the next actual election isn't going to be for a year and a half. You can't keep their attention for 10 minutes. So that really is going to hurt young people as well. So we don't want a super year and a really low year. We don't think that's a good idea. The other stuff in there is just if you stagger the terms this way is a little better than this other way, and so forth. I leave that to later in the written materials. You have some idea what we do in a municipal year because I gave you the municipal election calendar of 22 pages. There's still a lot that goes on. You can't just sort of wipe that slate clean. And you have this term here, as best as I can analyze it, it's the cities and towns that have 4-year terms for their top office. There's about 20-some of them. several of them for mayor. Stanford and Hartford have 4-year terms for council, and it's the Court of Council or some such thing up in Hartford, and Stanford, it's the Board of Representatives. But in any event, several of the towns, of the nearby towns, Fairfield, Bridgefield, Westport, have 4-year terms for their selectmen, top and the regular selectmen. But of course, they also have town meetings and such that have a great deal of their authority. The percentages you see there are their turnout percentages in the years I could get off the Secretary of State's website. I didn't get the 2005. The missing ones are not on the Secretary of State's website. They don't keep the records consistently. So it's sort of which is why it's, there's some gaps in the numbers in the earlier years. That's all I have at the moment.
Please, Steve.
Essentially, part of what you're saying is that if you go to a 4-year mayoral term, you, as a practical matter, are still going to have what I would call midterm elections, elections where the mayor is not running, but there are going to be other municipal offices running, and there's enough of them, even if the Common Council was on a 4-year running.
Right. Right now you have Board of Ed on that, and you also have,
Plus you have the taxing districts.
you're gonna have taxing districts, and because of vacancies, you're gonna end up frequently with a full election anyway.
So based on that assumption, one of the things that if you do go to a 4-year mayoral term, one of the questions one has to deal with, or should deal with, is what happens if there's a vacancy during that 4 years.
Yes.
And whether or not you have a special election, during that 4 years. You have a mayor who for good reason or not so good reason, is no longer mayor 1 year into a 4-year term, for example. I guess a couple of questions. One is, I would assume that if you're having what is functionally a citywide election on the next municipal round, there wouldn't be any significant extra cost, at least as far as conducting the election is concerned, wouldn't be any significant additional cost if that election was also a special election to fill the remainder of the mayoral term.
That's correct, and that is typically what the towns that have 4-year terms seem to do. They'll fill the vacancy by appointment until the next municipal election. Obviously, they don't. If the resignation was, October 30th, they can't put them on the ballot that fast.
Do you have a sense as to what the lead time on those is typically?
I can find out. It's probably the time when would have to be in time to print the ballots, and it would have to be in time to, but you typically would know that stuff coming out. It might not have to be back so far as to require a primary, but at least it would be into September, 90 days, say, something along those lines.
Okay. And just one other question, just kind of speculative. Would you see any particular hurdle in terms, putting aside the other questions just as a logistical matter, any particular difficulty if a special election for mayor were to be held in an even year? During a gubernatorial presidential election.
As long as it's a citywide office.
Yes, it would be a citywide office.
If it's a district office, you can't do it because the
Because
district
the
lines don't
districts are
match up.
different.
But a citywide office, no, you could,
There would be, okay.
you could throw that on, because it doesn't matter which district you're in, you all get to vote for it.
And then one purely technical question. Do you know, is the order of the ballot, the order in which the various offices appear on the ballot, dictated by any ordinance, statute, or is it primarily customary?
it's certainly customary. We've never looked into whether it could be changed, but you're talking mostly about dropping, so the others would presumably move up, and I don't.
Oh, no, I mean, if you did have, offices that carried over onto the back, you might have some choices to which was on the back and which were on the front.
Yes, but I do think that the plan was to try to get Board of Ed and council, all the major offices on the same side, so people would be more likely to vote for in all of those races. But
So if, for example, you didn't eliminate constable, you might be able to put constables on the back.
yeah, but there's no way to know it's the back, except the constables there. You could end up with somebody voting for constable, not realizing on the other side.
Huge
Crazy, but,
run-ups for constable, and nobody voted for mayor.
I don't think it would happen often, but it does. We have seen that happen. We'll vote for Board of Ed and a vote for a couple of constables and no vote on the front, which I'm sure was probably not what the person thought they were going to do.
Thank you.
So that we're clear, if, as the resolution provides, the mayoralty is 4 years, the council is 4 years, the Board of Education is adjusted accordingly, would that turn into a every 4-year election, a sort of a Super Tuesday type of an election, but then we have the requirement of a municipal election every 2 years? Is my understanding correct?
Yes, it would be a very low turnout, and then would have all of the problems that I previously mentioned. If you do that, please put it on the year right before the presidential, because for budgetary reasons, we get the money for a presidential primary as well, and that would even that out. It's really not a good way to run a department to have one really peak year and one really low year from a budgetary point of view. Also, we have to keep explaining why we want more money. Well, it's a presidential election. What are we supposed to,
No, that's one of the reasons I was asking that. And then as Mr. Geek proposed, to have the at-large 4 years, the council, but the district.
That would work.
2 years.
Staggering the terms as the Board of Ed now does would also work, and would keep you make it a single-sided ballot more easily attained. So yes. Yeah, you could have 4 and 2, you could have 4 and 4, but you could run one with the other and split them up when they run. I would also, just now talking as a citizen, rather than as the registrar, I think that having some significant offices on the ballot in that off year, and whatever the late year is, that the mayor is not on the ballot, it would allow the citizens to send a message to the council and the mayor or the Board of Ed or whatever, as it does now with the Board of Ed, that they don't like the way things are going. And yes, you can't replace the ones who are staying, but you could still send a rather significant number of new councilmen in if the citizens were very upset with how things work.
So then, if one were to have staggered terms, not only for the Board of Education, but also for the council, and these 2-year cycles have at-large council, at-large Board of Education, and then the next election in district, would that work?
It would make more sense to me if you could have one at large and the other in district, and then at large and in district the other way, because it would even out the number of people you get to vote for. You would vote for 5 at large council and 1 in district Board of Ed member, and the next year 4 at large Board of Ed and 2 in district council. You would have basically 6 significant races to cast a ballot on, not counting whatever the mayor was, obviously. And that might make the job of the citizen a little bit easier rather than 3 and 9. But that's, again, we could run it either way. I've got an analysis in there as to what would do to the ballot.
I saw that. Are you aware if there are any municipalities in Connecticut that have that?
I was not able to
Elections
find
like
one that had a split council, at large and in-district split. The Hartford has 9 councilmen. They'll have nice salaries and assistants that are on the website, but only 9, they have 4-year terms. Stanford, on the other hand, has 40 members of the Board of Representatives, 20 districts, 2 each, also with 4-year terms. But I wasn't able to find anybody that had a split at large and versus that.
I would like to invite you to our meeting on February 22nd.
Happy to come.
Thank you very much, and I'm grateful for all of your hard work and for the information you've provided. Does anyone else have a question?
Just a quick one. Stuart, thank you for the packet. I'm looking forward to looking into it, and yeah, I would love to have you at our next meeting, because one of the things I would ask if you could come up with some type, and it might be a guesstimate at this point, I don't even know where you're going to get it. Somebody brought it up, and I hate to say the top of the ticket, but I'm going to just call it that, so we know. Town clerk and mayor going on a 4-year, and if we keep the council just the way it is and the Board of Ed just the way it is, because it seems like we're going to have elections municipal every 2 years because of the way our districts are set up. If there's any way to figure in what the percentage of the drop-off would be in those non-top of the ticket election years.
I will do what I can. There are not a lot of examples to work from, and there's a great variation. I did make an attempt at it. There's a great variation in towns, whether the mayor's office is heavily contested that year, like when there's no incumbent or an incumbent is replaced, the numbers, the turnout goes way up. Our highest turnout for mayor in living memory was when Alex defeated Frank Esposito.
What percentage was that?
19, well, I'd have to do the percentage around the mid-40s, but it was about 19,000 as opposed to 13,000, 14,000 this last year. Quite a bit more, but not related to the
I mean, 'cause I know you mentioned
return
that
swap. So
if we held a municipal election every 4 years for all the offices, and then the 2-year elections for some of the in-district, you made a percentage that the voter
It would
turnout
be-
would be extremely low.
it would be extremely low.
That's why I'm trying to figure out what would happen on that off year if we did not have the mayor, the town clerk, the council, and board of ed.
Come up with the best I can.
Okay.
The more significant the offices you have in that off year,
The bigger the turnout.
the bigger the turnout.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Thank you very
but
much.
There is a great variation in the other towns based on who's running and whether they've got a strong opponent, which may almost trump the question of turnout based on simply the configuration of the ballot. Sadly, that's why you see big number differences in some of these towns where a popular incumbent running, nobody votes, unpopular incumbent, and a hot new contender, you get big voting. We notice these things in part because Norwalk typically has did the top 5 turnout, often third, beating both Hartford and Bridgeport often. And we see 1 year at Stanford, it's got a really big contest. And next year, well, the mayor's not on the ballot, and we have more people voting than they do, and of course, much bigger.
A quick question. If the also selectmen, treasurer, sheriff, and constable were eliminated from the ballot, would that result in a savings?
Well, yes, in programming, the memory cards, because it would be that much less. Printing on only one side of the ballot, or it's actually the programming and setup that's the same. They actually do print on the back side, so it's not an ink saving. But there is a saving in the cost of setting up the ballot that way. It's not vast, but I don't think there's much saving in going one big year and one small year, because you end up with a lot of money one year and less the next, but even probably even up. Longer 14-inch ballots are more expensive than 11-inch ballots as well. But these aren't a major cost in the process, actually.
Thank you very much. Elsa Peterson, and I don't want to mispronounce your last name. Obachowski, I apologize. Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Elsa Peterson Ovachowski, and I live at 41 East Avenue. So shame on me, I didn't do my research. I understand now that the state law says that we cannot have municipal elections in the even-numbered years, if I understand correctly. And I think it's too bad, because if the goal is to cut down on how many elections the taxpayers have to pay for, we could hold all our elections in the even-numbered years concurrent with the existing elections for state and federal officials. We have to have an election every 2 years anyway for U.S. Congress, state Senate, state representatives, so why not put our municipal elections on that same schedule? And I understand that the boundary lines of the districts are different, but this could be accommodated by splitting voting areas just as we currently do at Nathan Hale School for District A4 and District C2. But I guess that's not going to happen. I have a proposal that's not on your list, and I think it's very straightforward, and that is about non-sexist language. I think that all language in the charter should be changed to refer to council member instead of councilman, and council districts instead of councilmanic districts. It's time for the city of Norwalk to come into the 21st century and get rid of antiquated sexist language in the charter. I also have concerns about the Planning Commission and the Zoning Commission, and I've written up in detail. I've submitted a written comment through the law department, but basically it seems that both planning and zoning are not accomplishing what our city needs in terms of making Norwalk a livable, attractive place where people want to be, and I've gone into some detail in my suggestions about that. Regarding the term for mayor, I personally would keep it at 2 years because I think it's important for the voters of Norwalk to be able to vote out a mayor who is not doing a good job. And I feel the same way for council members. I have a written statement if I can leave it with one of you.
Thank you very much. May I ask you, this is the submission to the Corporation Council?
Yes, sir.
Office? It is? Okay, thank you. For the record.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Here's the official records, by the way. I don't know if you took it.
No, thank you. I didn't. Thank you for the record. Thank you very much for that. Linda Burkwell?
Hi, thank you for having this open meeting. I live at 4 South Main Street, and I'm new to Norwalk, so if some of the things I say sound like I come from another part of the country, it's true. I support changes to the Norwalk Charter to increase the term of all elected officials from 2 years to 4 years. I think imposing like a 12-year limit might be desirable, as well as if we could limit the campaigns to maybe 4 to 6 months before the general election, that wouldn't be bad. And here are my reasons. The 2-year terms cost the city, the citizens, and the elected officials in many ways. The cost of preparing for and conducting an election every year is a burden on our financial resources. Granted, the city has improved voting by using more and better technology. However, constantly providing and monitoring all voting activities is expensive. Newly elected officials and re-elected officials have a year to learn and respond to the responsibilities of their office before being distracted by yet another election. These campaigns take time to raise funds, build campaign staffs, and to campaign. Low voter turnout. Now, when I did research on voter turnout, I found that municipal elections in Norwalk rarely go be more than 30%. I don't know, is it caused by too many elections, too many people on the ballot, the lack of early voting? I'm with the League of Women Voters, and I talk to people about not voting and registering and so forth. And this summer I discussed voting in the C election in November. And some of the reasons that they were not going to be bothered was, I don't have time. I can't learn the qualifications and the reputations of all 15 to 20 people who are on every ballot. I only vote during presidential elections, the important years. Clearly, something's wrong, the indifference, confusion, family, and job responsibilities keeps them from voting. And I think sadly, in 2014, Connecticut citizens rejected early voting, or other states in the Union had that. The state I came from did, and it had people who work for a living to come into the 21st century. Thank you.
May I ask you a question, please, before you?
Yes,
Are you speaking on behalf of yourself or on behalf of the League of Women Voters?
I'm speaking on behalf of myself, but I'm just going to tell you, when I talk to people, they're going, I don't have time for all that. I can't get home in time. I can't do this, I can't do that. They just don't see it. I had 20 people to vote for last year. And I spent time looking for what a selectman was, and it was barely defined. And I looked to see what the sheriff and the constables, and I wanted to know what they did. It's not easy to find.
If you have any information that you'd like to share with us, we'd be grateful. And the League as well, please.
Pardon?
And the League of Women Voters, if they have any information that they'd like to share with us, that we would be grateful for that.
I know when I go to talk to kids, I help to register kids at school, and they go, I don't know if I want to do this. And so I said, oh, okay, don't register, don't vote. That's okay, it makes me more powerful. And one kid goes, I could care less. Another kid registered to vote. So I don't know what we can do to get people interested in elections.
Question. Thank you very much. I'm sorry about the not understanding the first name. Niederlin is the last name. I apologize.
Yeah. Good evening. I'm here to complain about something that isn't on the agenda,
Okay.
and that is the opportunity for a change in the charter to add a planner, a city planner.
Sir, may I ask you to put your name on the record and your address?
What?
Your name and your
Oh,
address.
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Adolph Niederland at 1 Green Hill Road, Norwalk.
Thank you.
When the city council members ran for re-election, there was almost a unanimous agreement that there was a need for a city planner. That is not on your agenda. And I think you're missing an opportunity. Because if the charter is to be revised, that's an important element. For example, why are we surprised that the city schools are terribly overcrowded? In recent years, there has been approved almost 3,000 new residential units. In the 2010 census, Connecticut had 1.3 children per residential unit, whether rented or owned. 3,000. If you say 30% of that would have children, you've got a lot of new children going into the schools. Nothing has been introduced recently by the planning and zoning to indicate that we're running out of infrastructure, a major loss. The same thing is true for the new grist mill unit, now going up on Glover Avenue. 700 units. Let's say we discount that by 30%. 200 children
in an area where there is no school, you need busing, and there's no money for it. You need a city planner to think ahead of the curve. Nobody's thinking about that. We've now blocked in the main library in downtown Norwalk by 2 residential units. There's no parking. The library is a critical asset to the city. Where are they going to park? There's no planning for that. You need a city planner, and the planning and zoning is not doing their job. They're doing the zoning job, but not the planning job. So I say that the charter revision group should include in the charter and the opportunity of changing the charter revision to include a city planner. We lost $1 million with the mosque issue because we didn't have a city planner. That would have paid for a well-qualified city planner. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Is that, I was going to ask you if you'd submit something to us, so I can take this as a submission. Thank you very much. Gloria Niederland.
Excuse me. Mr. Chairman, I suggest that you just maybe turn one way any new submissions this evening.
Yes.
So that
I was putting them on top.
we can indicate to the clerk which ones are
Yes.
new. And this way we can get copies to everybody if
I
they
will
like
do
them.
that. I will do that. I was
You
gonna
just you can flip
see
it
if
any way
you
you
want.
want. You're starting a new pile.
I will do that right now with this. Thank you. Good evening.
I'm Gloria Niederland, also at 1 Green Hill Road in Norwalk.
Thank you.
And I really hadn't read over the whole charter revision suggestions, but I do agree with Bill Collins that a 2-year term for the district council persons would be a good idea. The common council, 4 years, but the local person for your own district, 2 years, because you're in constant contact with that person. You're aware of everything that person does for you, that's good or bad. And so in 2 years, if you're not happy, you can make a change. I'm also in favor of a 2-year term for mayor. I don't know about other people, but there's so much going on in Norwalk between the building of rental apartments and the need for, there was an article in the paper the other day that we need 3 more schools, and information from my husband that the sewer system probably is just about adequate for what we have now, and with a couple of thousand more units going up on Glover and High Street, Cross Street, Mott Avenue, and Belden, I don't know where that sewage is going to go. So the reason that I'm bringing this up is that the only person, according to my thoughts, that could really bring this into perspective is the mayor. And if a mayor isn't doing that job, at least I can contain myself for 2 years and then look for someone else. So right now, that's how I feel, that I need guidance. I see all these plans going up. My husband and I go to a lot of meetings, but yet I have a difficult time bringing it all into perspective because we don't know everything that's going on. All the little itsy-bitsy secrets of the meeting don't get in the paper. You hear about them from other people who take an interest in things. So I think that a 2-year term for mayor, I don't care how many terms he runs for, or she, but it's 2 years at a time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Lisa Thompson?
Hi, Lisa Thompson, 24 Highland Avenue. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight regarding your charter revision considerations. In the interest of time, because I did write mine to be a 3-minute speech, but I want to try and talk to you rather than talk at you. I want to just, in the interest of time, I wanted to say that I agree with the elimination of positions that no longer hold relevance today. I have no problem with eliminating those. However, the term extensions do concern me. While I acknowledge that they may simplify and reduce electoral costs or allow some elected officials to focus more of their time on the job rather than an election, the question I have for you, all of you, is this: how will term extensions improve politician accountability? I benchmarked 22 Connecticut towns and cities against Norwalk, our neighboring towns and cities over 50,000 people, which I'll share with you right now. I did some homework.
This is a submission for the
Yes, it is a
commission.
submission.
Thank you very much.
There you go. It's even color coded.
No, I like it. Nice.
Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you.
So I benchmarked these 22 towns, like I said, over 50,000, or in our neighboring towns. And I came to the following conclusions. For the 22 towns, Bridgeport, Hartford, Stamford, and Stratford have 4-year mayors. Only Stamford has a 4-year council. I believe out of the 37 or 38 towns that have mayors, there's only 7 that have 4-year terms. The thing that I noticed about these towns, though, and you'll see as you go through the matrix, and I'll be happy to explain it further on your 22nd meeting, but most of these towns either have mayors that have more responsibilities, or smaller councils, or boards like P&Z that are combined or smaller. They may have a finance board that may not exist, or they are elected. My point is that Norwalk has a weak mayoral system and a large but individually unaccountable common council. And we have appointed critical boards like P&Z and finance. They are not accountable to the electorate. And oftentimes it appears as though no particular individual is in charge of some of the critical issues in Norwalk. I'm not against 4-year terms, but I think you need to address the responsibilities if you want to examine term extensions. For example, despite the current mayor's majority rule, his appointments and confirmed by council members, Norwalk is still no closer to fixing its P&Z issues than previous administrations. I agree with Mr. Niederland about having a city planner. How that's been ignored in our city charter, I don't know. In consideration, I don't understand why. Despite most of the candidates at the League of Women Voters Forum saying that they supported planning and zoning, revision, fix it, whatever you want to call it, nobody's doing anything about it. The general attitude is that's the zoning board's problem, and the zoning board isn't elected. Maybe I misunderstood, but another charter consideration you're looking at is shifting the political salaries to the finance board, which is also an appointed board by the very politicians whose salaries they'd be looking at. That's all I want to say about mayor and the common council. With regard to the Board of Ed, I think you should keep the terms staggered. During the superintendent crises that we had, our large turnover, I was open to making some of the members mayoral appointments. But I've since changed that position, having witnessed the voters correct problematic members through the election process. Staggered terms help keep consistency for the board, and the majority of Connecticut towns that I've outlined there all have staggered terms, with the exception of New Haven, which appoints, and actually Hartford has a hybrid system, but everybody else has staggered terms. Finally, with regard to recall, there was, I believe it was Mr. Petrini who talked about concerns raised over stinkers. If you had somebody for 4 years, what would you do to get rid of them? The one thing I noticed when I went on all the websites, which is how I gathered all this data on various charters, most municipal websites cited concerns over weak recall rules, say that 3 times tonight, as the primary reason for limiting things to 2-year terms. And finally, all I want to say is, to wrap things up, this year, particularly with the presidential elections, we're seeing an unprecedented number of Americans on both sides of the aisle declare their frustration and alienation with the status quo and the business-as-usual process with politics. Hence the reason for perhaps the overwhelming results for Mr. Trump and Mr. Sanders the other night in New Hampshire. As you all embark, and I appreciate the service you're providing to the city, but as you embark on the critical task of examining the charter revision considerations, I ask that you consider what's best for the people and not necessarily the politicians in determining how best to govern Norwalk. Thank you very much.
Before you leave, are there any questions?
On my chart? Questions on my chart?
Well, you said a great deal. My sense is there'll be some questions.
I'm just a humble
Yeah.
civilian. I am not a politician and I don't run for office.
Well,
I'm just a
I'm
resident.
not humble, so I have a couple of questions. The process is, we, as a commission, present a report to the council for the council's consideration. And the council can vote on it, or the council can send it back to us to do more work. And if the council then affirms whatever has been sent to it, it then goes to the citizens of Norwalk. How do you feel about that?
I think it's a bold move this year. As a citizen, where there is a lot of overwhelming people turning out, whether they're Republican or Democrat, in terms of frustration, a lot of this seems self-serving to me. That's been my frustration. If we were to look at more responsibilities, I wouldn't mind having the 4-year term of mayor if the mayor had more responsibilities. Many of these towns that have 4-year mayors have very strong mayors. We do not have a strong mayoral system. We have a strong common council. And so the problem is, it's just 4 more years of, ribbon cutting and Facebook stuff. As a mayor, I mean, the most pressing issue we have is planning and zoning, and we have kicked that to the curb as a mayor and as a common council.
Stay with the mayor. If it is presented to the citizens of Norwalk in November, they vote it up or they vote it down. The system works. Would you agree with that?
It depends on how it's presented.
Well,
I mean, I don't want to argue with you, that's fine. I mean, I might.
no, this is all fact-finding for us.
I just don't see, the question I would have is how does it improve accountability? I understand from the ballot point of view, but what I don't understand in comparing it to most of the other cities, most other cities, for both mayor and common council, keep it at 2 years. Now, I acknowledge Connecticut may not be the poster child for good governance in this country. And I was going to look at some other states to see maybe how they do it, because I think the objective is to have better governance and make Norwalk be a better city. And I guess where my frustration is as an active resident, particularly in education matters and certainly in planning and zoning, is my government is not fixing those things in planning and zoning, and it hasn't for several administrations. So I don't understand how 4-year terms will make it better. Now, I believe we need a city planner. I see a mayor who appoints people to a planning and a zoning commission for a finance board, and then I see it confirmed by our common council, and then I see people wash their hands. And we've got a whole heck of a lot of problems going on in planning and zoning, and the electorate has no control over that. So if there was more ownership of some of our
But in this
criticisms.
instance, there is the electorate. So whatever is presented from us to the council goes to the people.
I would rather have seen planning and zoning dealt with rather than extended
You've
terms,
been
that's
clear
all.
about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, though.
Thank you. Robert Hart? Robert? Yes. Please, thank you. Diane just arrived and added her name. Look forward to.
I'd like to add my name too. I like
Homework for you. Would you? This is a submission for the commission. Thank you very much. We'd like to have this is probably something that why don't I give you what you have tonight? So you can-
We talked about the single page.
But
I think the only things that we've done that on the stage is to go over this.
Robert Hart. These two, so, yeah. I would really prefer. I appreciate that. Robert, thank you.
Hi, my name is Robert Hard. Boy, this is loud. My name is Robert Hard. I reside at 213 Wolf Pit Avenue, Norwalk. Have done for almost 20 years. I want to thank you very much for coming out tonight, for postponing cocktails and dinner. It's really uncivilized, but it's a true tribute to your civic nature that you have done so, and I'm grateful, and I'm hungry, and I'm thirsty, and I'm going to be brief. Okay, first, I agree that the mayor's term should be extended to 4 years, and to get rid of the duty-free city positions. I would like to support Bill Collins in his objection to term limits, and for me, the reasons are twofold. First, it's undemocratic for me not to be able to vote for candidates that I support. And second, as soon as the mayor is reelected, he or she is a lame duck for that entire term. So it's good to have a little bit of a threat. Oh, I'm going to be back, potentially, until you die. So, you know, I really think it unnecessarily weakens the office to have term limits. Not so sure about 4-year terms for council members. I figure if Jim Hines and the other congressmen have to put up with it, well, we do too. Now, my main reason for being here is for you to consider the injustice of having discriminatory water rates. If you don't live in the first or second taxing districts and you're out of district, you pay 50% more. The rates are unequal, and the paper handout I gave you have copies from their websites of what their rates are. They are exactly 50% more if you are not within the district. The rate disparity is not justified by any incremental cost of serving people out of district. I'm in District D. All the water for the first taxing district comes through my district. It's cheaper to serve me than it is the first district. By the same token, if the first district geographical area has some huge capital expense, like Flint, Michigan, having to replace their pipes, I do believe they're not going to carve that out and pay for it themselves. I think that we, out of district, are going to pay, as we always have and always will, along with everyone else. What they say is taxation without representation and a monopoly without regulation. The reason it's not regulated is that the state considers it to be a municipal utility. And in the context of municipal utilities, voters get to vote on commissioners, but that is not true in Norwalk. Unless you are in the first district, you don't vote for the first district commissioners. And same if you are getting water from the second district but don't live in it, you don't vote for those commissioners either. You have no input, you have no recourse. And you're surprised that there's been a bit of discrimination against the people who are not the voters? Now they do try to rationalize that since they are on the hook ultimately, legally, for the bond issues, that therefore they are entitled to have discriminatory rates. And sometimes some of the people that I've spoken with in the first and the second, you know, make it out like, oh God, we're under this crushing burden of debt. We can barely handle it, you know. But the reality is that the taxpayers have never been asked to be a financial backstop. The bondholders like to know that it's a GO bond, a general obligation. But it doesn't have any real meaning. The ratepayers are always going to pay. There's far more ratepayers than there are taxpayers, and there's just no plausible scenario where the taxpayers are actually going to be asked to pay in districts, so that's a non-argument. And as H.L. Mencken once remarked, if you rob Peter to pay Paul, you can certainly count on the support of Paul. The rate equalization would obviously raise the water rates in districts 1 and 2 and lower it everywhere else. But still, the people in districts 1 and 2 are not going to be paying as much as we do now. And so there's really no injustice in that. All that's being asked is that the monopolist give up its monopoly rent, just like any tortfeasor is compelled to part with unjust enrichment. is what simple justice requires. Anyway, the,
May I ask, could I have the H.L. Mencken comment?
oh, yes, yeah.
He lived in Baltimore last.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I know, well, you know, Baltimore, Norwalk, you know. No, the quote was, no, if anyone who robs Peter to pay Paul can certainly count on the support of Paul. What this is a veiled reference to is the fact that the representatives from the first and second taxing districts, if they vote for a change, are going to have to face their own constituents and say, yes, I did vote to raise your rates because it was the right thing to do. So, I mean, I'm expecting opposition from that end and hopefully support from, you know, the other districts. You know, because there'd be 2/3 of the ratepayers are out of district citywide. The language is in section 5.3, water rates, and I have it in your handout, and just to propose that it says that the commissioners of the district are authorized to fix rates for water, and then I put in parentheses, without discrimination between in-district and out-of-district customers. Simple as that. And that's what I have for you tonight, and thank you very much for your time.
Questions? Thank you.
Great.
The boundaries of the districts dictated by the charter?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, while we're on that, yeah, read the first few sections and, you know, make sure you have a compass and a map in front of you. Something else you might consider doing is getting rid of some of the dead wood. In section, it's Article 1, beginning around 27 to 72. It's mainly about water bond issues for the first taxing district. And it starts out with the bond issue of 1917, then we go to 1929, then we go to 1933, 51, 55, and then it ends. Now, there have been bond issues since then, but all those are in the charter, all of them have been redeemed, all of them have been paid off. There's no reason for, you know, to make researchers like me actually have to read it all. Although it is historically interesting. It's not necessary to be there anymore.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Michael Dunn, unfortunately, your name was covered, so I apologize, and please.
Never trust a lefty.
That's no problem. My name is Michael Dunn. I live at 18 Cormore Drive in District A. So my main reason for being here is to voice my strong opposition to term limits. And I have a few reasons why. I'll kind of go from tactile to philosophical, roughly. So the first is that broadly, a mayor who can't run for re-election is instantly unaccountable. You know, we like to think of elected officials as our employees. You know, they like to say that we are their bosses. So if you had an employee, one thing you would not want to do is say, okay, we finished your, you know, yearly performance review. It went great. You know, we'd hire you again. In fact, we did just hire you again. So now what we're going to do is not give you another performance review. You know, you have carte blanche, but you're done after this period of time. No more performance reviews. Go wild. I like to think that I am someone who would continue working. My baser instincts probably would be that what's the point of working for my boss if he just told me that I'm all set and I'm done after a certain period of time. So that's the first problem. The second is that, you know, being mayor is not an easy job, and I think there's not a lot of people who can do it. So, but what we're basically saying is we have someone that the voters have found qualified. We have someone the voters have found qualified 2 times, and now they are the only person in the city who's not allowed to run for mayor anymore. Now, maybe it's, you know, maybe they're not qualified anymore, but I think that's something that the voters can decide upon. And kind of going into the accountability argument, you know, one thing that a lot of people talk about, specifically, we'll say with members of Congress, is the revolving door argument. So basically, you know, if you're in Congress, you're looking for your next gig, and you're saying, well, worst comes to worst, if I lose this re-election, I can go work for XYZ lobbying firm. I can go work for the natural gas industry. So what you're saying with term limits is basically now not only do they have a parachute, but they have a goal to aim for. So we're basically saying, you know, in 4 years, you need to look for a new job. So again, we like to think that someone who's dedicated and a dedicated public servant would say, I'm going to spend 4 years working on this, and on day one of, the next day, I'm going to start looking for a job. But I think that if the point of a good political system is to make sure that, again, elected officials are accountable, you end up with a situation where, 2.5 years later, somebody says, I need a new job. So even if it's not, working for the natural gas industry, maybe it's saying, well, I'd like to be very involved with the National Conference of Mayors because, the next, in 2 years I'm going to need a job, and I have a lot of connections nationwide. There are a lot of people who would hire somebody who has a lot of connections with other mayors. Now again, the, National Council of Mayors is great, but if in the back of their head they're thinking, well, I need a job, it is going to, I think, tempt anyone to say, maybe I'm going to go to this meeting I wouldn't ordinarily take because I need these connections. Next, I just want to talk a little bit about the point of term limits. I think the previous speaker kind of brought up that you can make the case for a president and say, we don't want despots. We don't want someone who will serve, over and over and over. But I think we have very limited concern of having Augustus Caesar of Norwalk. And going a little bit more into that, if you look at, the last, say, 40, 50 years of Norwalk history, Norwalk residents have never been shy about getting rid of mayors they don't want. I think just 4 years ago, they decided not to re-elect a mayor who had been in office for exactly 8 years. And to me, this shows the system works. It's been 8 years, and sure, they had to go for election 4 times instead of 2 under a 4-year system, but clearly there's no issue here. You look at even surrounding towns, Bridgeport just got rid of a mayor in a primary. There's a history both in Norwalk and in the region of not electing mayors who we don't want to have in office anymore. And finally, philosophically, I have an issue with the fact that I have an issue with all restrictions on who can run for office, whether that's term limits, whether that's age limits. I think that voters are qualified. We entrust, the point of democracy is that we entrust voters to pick the best person. And so it's very strange to me that we say, we can select a mayor who's a felon. We can select a mayor who has never had a job in his life. We can select a mayor who has, obviously bigoted and terrible ideas, but what we can't do is select a mayor who's been mayor before. To me, not only does it not make sense, but it's inconsistent with sort of what we think the point of democracy is and what voters are qualified to do. When I was in AP government 10 years ago, my AP professor said that we already have term limits in the called elections, and I think that's true, and I think that's what we should continue to do. So that's what I'd say about term limits.
Questions? My instincts are you're a very, very good student of government.
Thanks.
I appreciate this. Thank you. Diane, Lord Shelley.
Good evening. I first wanted to thank you for not only holding this, as I know is your due to do, but also the fact that you were urging people to come to the meeting. That's a rarity, and I thank you for trying to have the media help us get people here.
And you're very welcome to our meetings as well. The next one is on February 22nd at 6:30.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know which room it will be in, but...
Okay.
Not a public hearing. Sorry.
No, it's not a public hearing, but our meetings are...
Open to the public,
Yes,
not
they
a
are.
public hearing.
That's
just
right.
So people understand.
We haven't set a date yet for the next public hearing, but we will.
Yes. Thank you, Marika. I wanted to, first of all, ask whether or not there are people that are up at the capital budget hearing. 2 very important meetings tonight. Is there a chance that people that couldn't make this meeting could submit written suggestions after tonight?
Yes, we encourage that.
Okay. I'm sorry I was late.
No, and they're to be sent to Barbara Tisha.
Yes.
Attention, she's the legal secretary at the Corp Counsel's office.
Sure.
Room 237. think.
It was in the hour, so I'm,
Mr.
thank you.
Corporation Counsel.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
That's okay.
You know where it is.
I do, I'm sorry.
Places.
All right, I have these marked. I know tonight is a time to take a look and for citizens to make a suggestion about other places to inquire. The main 6 or 7 items that the council suggested, I think are noble goals. On those, I wanted to say that currently, I'm doing some study of what other towns have, in addition to what Lisa Britton-Thompson, her wonderful study. I'm a former president of League of Women Voters, and because of that, I have a different kind of view about elections. Now, the thing is, currently, I'm of the mind that I would like to see a 4-year term for our mayor. For a city of this size, its complexities. I am currently of the mind that I'd like to see term limits, but in the form of this wording. You cannot have more than 2 contiguous terms, so that if someone were to skip, as a mayor sitting in this room had experienced, but they came back and got their people together after 1 or 2 mayors, why not have them back as long as they could prove to the people that they had the people's best interest? So that is something that I think is very distinct, and I haven't heard many people talking about that point. On the council, the jury's still out as to whether I feel they should have 4-year terms. I have implored the council to do their due diligence as much as possible. I do feel I would like to see the Board of Estimate make it easier to set their compensation, because they do put in a lot of time. So I am in favor of that reverting to the Board of Estimate. And there are times when the public can speak to the Board of Estimate, so that would not leave out the public for their view. The other items that I would like you to consider, either for this time or for next time, I know, are the following sections. The first is the relationship, it's Chapter 1-189.2, authorization of council to reorganize certain departments.
Could you repeat that, please?
Sure.
Chapter 1?
I think it's Chapter 1-1, Section 189.2. Now, I may have my categories incorrect. I've had a long week. It's 1-189.2, authorization of council to reorganize certain departments. Now more than ever, and I'm sure all of you could download this from the city website, the organizational chart. Now, I have a feeling that for this round, we will not be able to get to this, but I implore us, and I think that you have the power to begin a study committee to look at possibly other things that we could look at after November, and we could get that committee set up now, and if you or the mayor decides not to, the public can easily do so, and that is the power that the council currently has to reorganize certain departments. They currently have that power. But I suggest later on in this, there is discussion as to the ability of us to have a planning commission, planning and zoning's powers and duties, redevelopment and other departments. Redevelopment is an agency currently. I'm of the mind that the time has come to go back to the drawing board and to take a look at mixing it up, removing redevelopment agency, removing the planning and zoning as we know it, and take a look and see what kind of structure we need in our city to have proper land use planning and development. Other cities have done this. Stanford, for instance. Now, they had a very, very busy and direct guy named Malloy who decided to formulate bureaus. The reason why I think it's important for you to hear this today is because we can begin studying that the whole summer, and I'm hoping that you make recommendations that after this round, which deals with term limits and the like, if you don't feel that you want to begin this now for the November vote, we need to get started now to get our city organized in a way for our modern times and our needs in this city. So there are provisions in the charter that establishes planning commission, planning and zoning's duties, appointments, and I believe the redevelopment agency. The redevelopment agency was formed as such to accept bonded, to accept monies, but they have a lot of urban planners in their midst that we need in the planning and zoning side of the business. I came in when Ms. Britton Thompson was talking about a planner, a city planner. And I know I only have a few more seconds. I believe currently, we are paying as taxpayers many city planners. Are we getting the bang for the buck? I don't think so. So rather than inventing new forms of, we just have to make sure the people that are allowed those positions are qualified, have master's degrees in urban planning, have shown that they know the bigger view. And I think that we need to get started now to do that. I just have one other thing, and you'll see in Article 12, it's the Planning Commission, and it lays out for all of you some of the duties. I think we need to really take a look and get this reorganized. I do think under the police powers, my printer skipped that page, but I would like you to consider in the charter, so it's institutionalized and not subjected to politics. And we need, in the police department, a citizen review board. Now, you could do that for this November cycle. I think the public is smart enough to see 5 or 6 different questions. So I do implore you to consider that for this time. And lastly, we've had some issues with the Public Works Department, and this is in Chapter 1-443, 444, 445, apportioning assessment costs. I think we need to look at that again. I think it's very unfair for citizens, often elderly citizens, to have to pay for public sidewalks. I think that's an ancient thing that needs to be removed, thought about again. And lastly, a lot of things that we think we need to change quickly, we can do so through the ordinance process. But the things that I mentioned tonight, I think are very important to get started on, and I thank you for your time.
Please, thank you. Are there any questions? To be clear, I believe that our appointments end with the submission of our report. What you're asking for, if this is something that we cannot address, given what we have, the mandate we have now, it would require a new charter revision commission appointed by the council. I may be wrong on that, but...
Mr. Chairman, what you could do, if any of you feel it is worthy, you can make recommendations that said a new charter revision commission, because you had so much to do this time, that you fully recommend, since it hasn't been reviewed for eons, that they begin immediately. And you could actually specify for the council that you do so. I've spoken with the mayor, and he said that he knows there are a lot of things that could be changed, and that he is thinking about asking the council for study of different topics. So if you put the weight of your wonderful volunteerism behind it, if you think anything that I've said or what other people said is worthy, make the recommendations in writing, and that will help guide them.
Thank you for your input tonight. I'm grateful.
Thank you.
Nora King.
Nora, before you start, we've been giving everybody a little bit of leeway for 3 minutes, not to start with you, but when we get to the 3-minute mark, it seems like quite a few more people are signing up than we thought. I'll give you a little wave, not to be rude, maybe at that point, you can, all the speakers going forward can kind of wrap it up. Sorry to be that guy, but, I think we signed on about 10 more people since we had to sign it, so. Okay.
No worries. I'm short but sweetener. Nora King, 17 Covewood Drive. I feel like I speak from a little bit of experience since I was a former council person and a former zoning commissioner. And I've been pretty active in Norwalk politics as well as a lot of civic associations, civic groups. I believe our term should be limited to 8 years for mayor. I do think it should be a 4-year term, and I also think there should be limits on the common council role. I don't think anyone should be on the common council for 20 years. I don't think it's a benefit to the city, and honestly, I think that we do have a lot of talent in our city to make way for new generations, new energy, and new blood. We need to pay them. We need to pay them more. I'm not sure I agree with that percentage of the mayor's salary, but they should be paid accordingly for their work. It is, if you do your job well when you're on the common council, it is a lot of work. And good council people, they dedicate their time and, you know, use their own toners, printers, everything else, and, you know, pay them. BOE should stay as it is. I think the staggered terms work. I think it leads for someone who brings yesterday's knowledge to the table, and I think that model should be brought over to the Common Council. I think that a 2-year terms for district levels is great. However, I do think a 4-year term for at-large is called for, and I think that helps with keeping some continuity on the Common Council. All other positions should be eliminated. That ballot is confusing. I have worked the polls now for way too many years, and people don't understand them, and it takes away from the roles that are important to us, like Board of Ed members, Common Council, Mayor, and obviously commissioners. I'm going to just touch on this idea of a city planner. I am sort of very disappointed that we're more focused on terms and less on cleaning up our planning and zoning. A city planner is needed. A lot of people campaigned on it this last election. And it, you know, Norwalk it's one debacle after another that costs taxpayers, you know, a lot of money. And I think talented people should be hired to planning and zoning. It shouldn't be about friends or you did this for me and I'm going to point you to the board. It should be qualified people that go on it with thoughtful planning that understand how our city works and what our city's going to need in 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. This is actually not something that I don't know if the city charter has any say over, but I also think it's time for the city of Norwalk to let people not necessarily be a Democrat or a Republican, that we have a lot of talented people in the city that are unaffiliated, and basically there's a lot of bad stuff happening in political parties these days, and I think we should make it easier for people who do not want to be affiliated with a party to be able to hold and run and be part of our system. Thank you. I hope that was short enough.
But before you, please, no, thank you. Just in response to that, there are state statutes that we have to comply with as far as any type of a committee. There can't be more than X number of political party members. So that would, the state governs that.
Well, I do know that.
In my experience with the Board of Ethics, yeah, that's how we had to, it was composed. Okay. But I have a question for you. I understand about the 4-year term for the mayor and limiting it to 8 years, but the council, you said something about the council term, but then putting a limitation on it, just so I'm clear.
I think the council should totally be limited. I think that anyone who's serving more than 8 years in our city is not doing our city justice. And I think it's okay if people leave it and come back 4 or 6 years down the road, but being on the Common Council for 8 years is plenty, and I don't think it's in the benefit of Norwalk for people to be on the Common Council for like 20 years.
Is it a 4-year term, or I lost that? So you're advocating a 4-year term for the council, but with a 2-term limit?
I think you should have 4 years for at-large candidates and 2 years in district. And I think
that would be a limit then on 2 years in district.
It would mean you could run 4 times in district. You could serve a total of 8 years. It doesn't matter what you're running at as long as your time is 8 years.
Okay. I appreciate the clarification.
And you know, I think a lot of people worry about like the election cycle and not getting people out to vote. And I do think that is a concern, but I mean, as a nation as a whole, we have a lot of, exactly, and I think it's, if we want to turn that around, it's how Norwalk in general treats the elections, and that should not be a reason to not put the best form of government forward in our city.
Questions? Thank you very much. Is it James Conn? I'm sorry.
Don't apologize yet, I haven't even said it.
No, I just don't want to mispronounce it.
That's fine, I've answered to worse than that. I've answered to worse than that. My name is James Conn. I live at 12 Union Avenue, right around the corner here in District A. So I first want to say thanks for the opportunity to address the commission regarding charter reform. And I want to keep my comments brief and say that what charter reform should be focused on is compelling, measurable ways to create value for the Norwalk taxpayer and looking for ways to streamline, make efficient, and hold government accountable, period. There are serious, serious pressing issues in Norwalk. Issues, by the way, larger and more measurable than how long the mayor's term is or how easy elections are for politicians. And to compound matters, some of these changes are actually addressable specifically by meaningful, compelling change to our charter. With all due respect to some of my friends who are in this very room, I'm completely disinterested in how easy it is to remain a politician in Norwalk. And frankly, I'm in favor of just about anything that would increase that barrier, would increase the barrier of entry. We seem to have a laser focus on fixing something that needs to be addressed so urgently that it would have affected, had it already been enacted, exactly one mayor in the entire history of Norwalk, and that would have been Frank Esposito. There's nobody else who ever served more than 8 years. So obviously, and I'm talking before we even had this charter. I mean, back when it was, doing whatever we were doing with muskets down on the shore. So monkeying around with term limits and lengths of a weak mayor and an overly sprawling council and making it less difficult for government to give raises to government employees, it gives every appearance of just amateur, self-serving behavior, especially in light of the things that we should be looking at. This is charter review. We're not even entertaining the idea of looking at the city manager model. We're not looking at the overlap or effectiveness of our boards or departments, or if those boards or departments are best served appointed rather than being elected. We're not providing infrastructure to provide for enforcement of already existing codes that we're told we just don't have the resources to address. We're worried about how long the mayor's term is going to be. As far as I'm concerned, the commission's mission is singular: to make Norwalk's municipal government an effective, professional organization. And I'd encourage you all to view your role on the commission as pursuing that mission as you proceed. And that's really all I have. Thanks for the time. Thanks. Any questions? And I'll be making a submission as we go here. I just wanted to keep it as brief as I could. Thanks.
Is that going to include the city manager model as well?
As far as a suggestion of it, or an analysis of it, or in what manner would it be beneficial to be included?
You raise city manager. And
yes.
Obviously, city managers, in my experience, is typically appointed by a common council.
Yes, that tends to be the model. Yes, we're talking about a multi-million-dollar operation here, and I don't mean to be adversarial. I mean, no. I always mean to be adversarial, but
I deal with adversaries every day. No, I guess my question is, if assuming the city manager model and the appointment by the common council, how many years should that council be elected?
I don't know. I mean, I'm just suggesting that my point in mentioning the city manager model was that we're talking about charter review.
Yes.
And it seems like the thing that we're focused on most is the thing that is potentially going to benefit the people who live in Norwalk least. So the reason why I suggest the idea of a city manager is just because it's something that we should at least put together a fact-finding mission on and determine whether or not it's something that's appropriate to pursue. I mean, as I said, this is not Mayberry. This is a multi-million-dollar operation here. There's no excuse for it not to have set quantifiable benchmarks and things that people commit to. We're talking about, it was suggested if you have a performance review for an employee, regardless of the outcome of that performance review, you wouldn't just fire them. Well, in the private sector, you either did or didn't hit your benchmark.
Right.
And your contract either is or is not reviewed. So that's a fair point, except for the small little detail that we don't actually have that performance review existent. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Angela Harrison, please.
Good evening. I'm Angela Harrison. I live at 7 Sable Street, South Norwalk. And I'm here, I do want to say that I agree that I do believe, like this gentleman said, that, this is a multi-million-dollar business and people need to be accountable. And one thing I find, I think that the terms should be 2 years, because if you can't do your job or you're not doing it, then, we need to look elsewhere, because we are lacking so far behind. The one thing I would like to bring to the attention, that maybe somebody could do some fact-finding, investigate, whatever you're gonna do, is that, and I don't hear anyone in Connecticut addressing it or talking about it, that our land records are being polluted. And they're being polluted through the banks, through the attorneys who are filing in land records throughout Connecticut false documents. Massachusetts has stopped it from happening in their state. New York has stopped it. I don't know what Connecticut is doing that they're not on board, but it's something that somebody needs to be talking about and to at least investigate, because it's gonna come back to bite everybody. If your land records are being polluted and everybody's just, our government really should be saying something about it so people can, start looking out or figure out how are we going to address this issue. They know that robo-signers are signing everywhere. There was a big foreclosure bubble that happened throughout the United States. Connecticut was not, it happened in Connecticut as well. And as a result of that, the land records are being polluted. And somebody has to begin to address it, put it on the forefront and talk about it so something can start to get done about it. Because right now, no one's even talking about it. And it's definitely happening. And it's something that with all the people that are moving to Norwalk and all the building, it could make things very impossible. In fact, it already is. Just because we're not talking about it, no one's not doing anything about it now, it already is a problem legally. And it actually is a federal problem. So I just would hope that your team can investigate and say, well, maybe this is something we have to put in the forefront and talk about, begin to talk about the issues. And like he said, we're talking about, well, how long should the mayor be here? 2 years, but there are other pressing issues that are affecting people a lot more deeply that are not being talked about. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Any questions, please? Virginia,
Guimond.
Guimond, thank you very much.
My name is Virginia Guimond. I live at 26 Shorefront Park in South Norwalk. I was born and brought up in this city, actually, and I've seen many, many changes, some good and some not so good. And I am for a 2-year for the mayor, and the reason being for that is most of the mayors over the years I have found have come back for, 2 more years. They're voted back in again for a total of 4 years. So it almost happens automatically. And I also feel that 8 years is long enough. If they should leave and come back later on, then that's okay. Like Mr. Collins, that would be fine. But no more than 8 years in a straight row. I also am for a city planner. Like I said, I've seen a lot of things happen in this town and city, I should say, and it needs someone to oversee it. what's going on in the schools, I think, is so sad. I have two grown sons, and they both, one moved to New Jersey, wanted to live near us, but just couldn't handle the schools, and private school is so expensive. He moved to New Jersey. The other one moved out of the city into to Westport, actually, where the schools are better so far. So I think that has to be looked into, and crowding in these schools is not going to do it. It's just going to make more trouble. Children growing up in junior high, it's a fact, the more that there is in a class, more likely they're going to get into some kind of trouble. So I think that has, city planning and the schools have to really be looked into. And the other thing I think is that this is a very good idea what you're doing. You've got your work cut out for you, there's no doubt about that. And a volunteer, when you're putting together, some people said about putting together some organizations to overlook things, be careful about waste. Many times groups are joined, they come together and then nothing gets done. So when you're doing that, make sure you have qualified people, and it really is something that's going to get done and not just waste the taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Are there any questions? No?
Thank you.
Just a point of information, Westport is a 4-year term.
Okay.
So,
It would be interesting, I didn't do any research. I didn't even know I was going to be here tonight.
we're very happy you are.
But it would be interesting to see how many mayors ended up having a second term because they were voted back in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mike, Doug Hempstead. Okay.
I'm going to live it.
Thank you for your input tonight, Doug. You may be seated.
I may not. No. I guess I'm closer to child terminal. I just wanted to address, unfortunately, because of my work, I was not involved when your committee was all put together, and thank you all for your public service. So as you will find out, as always, it is not the most thankful job that you do, but appreciate your efforts you're putting into this and the time you're putting into this. I just want to comment one thing about term limits, whether it be for council people, mayor, whatever. I'm not in favor of it, especially at the local level. I think we have a 116-year history in this town. I think you've only had 2 mayors go 4 terms for 8 years, and 2 mayors one went 10 and one went 14 years, so 7 terms. That's been the max. We've not been a town, which has been kind of, I think, good for the town, where towns tends to be somewhat of a turnover town. We're good for maybe 4 or 8 years, and it's kind of like people want a little bit of a change. So I think history speaks for itself there. You have a couple of items also. They talk about the compensation for council people. Personally, I could care less. Don't think it's that important. But the council is missing an important tool, which we need to figure out how to do. We don't truly have technically any support staff or any funding of any kind of reason to spend on either research or anything like that. Technically under the charter, the city clerk is the clerk of the council, if you read it correctly. The council only gets appointed assistant city clerk, which is not the clerk of the council, even though people reverse that. I think that's more important for an elected official who's basically a volunteer to try and do its due diligence on certain items. We either have to rely on staff that's appointed to us, and 2 of your members have served. Know that in some cases, when you have health or public safety, we really don't have anybody assigned to that. There is something that was left out in your charge for the charter, which I think does a disservice and is a pretty simple fix. Throughout the charter, it just says councilmen. And it should never happen that way, but considering 54% of people are women that show up to vote, let alone it should say councilman or councilwoman or councilperson. It's time that just get addressed. It's a simple fix, and if it takes money to change every page, then it takes money to change every page. One of the things that I'm still struggling with, and those who served some of the caucuses and over the years with me that the 2-year, 4-year term, first of all, the 4-year term for mayor seems to come more out of the business side or those who have actually been in government who want certain continuities. The public has certainly decided in the past if they want somebody to continue serving the city, they do so. But the real due diligence, I think, needs to come, and it's talked about by Mr. Wells tonight and a few others, is what is the effect of putting the head of the ticket, and I agree with Mr. Trini on that, the head of the ticket, and then you're trying to get people to show up in the off years. It's a struggle enough to get the public involved on a local election year, considering we're usually at about 38% or lower. All right, then now you go to a year where there's no real top of the ticket, who would go show up? So I think they started some of the research. I think you really need to understand what happened to elections after Stanford went to a 4-year term for mayor and left everybody else to 2 years. What has been the outcomes as part of your due diligence? I know there's been talk, it's fine getting, to me personally, getting rid of the sheriffs and the sheriff and all that kind of stuff. Actually, you can kind of make it an equal playing field and take the sheriff's position and make one more constable, so there's 4 from each party running and got 8 constables, solve that issue. And there's talk about I've heard no recall for council members to go to a 4-year term, what ifs. Well, there's always the what ifs. The what ifs have been there about what if the mayor is somebody you don't like and you want to recall. So you put into motion, it's part of the, if there's a change proposed, that you put in recall for everybody that's elected. Put in the process, get it done. And ethics takes care, I know when the chairman now has had experience, we have a pretty strenuous ethics code that also is certainly an avenue for removing someone if there's an issue going on that calls for public removal. Then I have to ask the general question because this was asked 2 years ago in our caucus, this was asked in a previous caucus I served in, is there a public outcry for changing all the amount of term? I like accountability, always have. And really, that's all I really wanted to speak of. I can answer 2 questions, I think. Somebody brought up taxing districts before, and that seems to come up every 15 years to the charter revision. If I am correct, and our corporation council will verify that sometime in the future, that is a state act that created those government bodies, even though it's in our charter. I think it is a state that created it when they consolidated the city and made them their own elected form of government. I think the state would have to enact a change to that. It's not just a local act.
Yeah, we're creatures of the state, and it would either be done by, either authorized by general statute or by special act, and you'd have to research whether that was part of the special act. I think that's what you're referring to.
Right, and I may be incorrect on that, but I know it's been discussed in the past. And the other thing is you can take up anything you want. You're just charged with, you have to answer the questions the legislative body, but if you feel free there's something else that you should take up, that's what you're here for. And that's why you're appointed.
And that's why
it's
we're
a free-for-all.
That's why we're
So if you wanted to be. All right, but thank you for your service.
I have a question for you, Doug. You raise recall. Are we having recall plus term limits, or are we having recall and no term limits?
No term limits. I'm not in favor, personally, you're asking, be it for the mayor or anybody else, I'm not in favor of term limits.
No term limits, but
If the public is that apathetic, if they feel, and we hear about every congressman, every senator in the country, you hear about, oh God, guy's been there for 50 years, he's a senator from the state of North Carolina or whatever. Well, the public put him in, This, on the local level, there's not the money and the outside interest pouring into campaigns, especially at the council level, even at the mayoral level. It's pretty, usually taking more out of pocket than you're out anything. So, the term limit thing, I honestly, look, in a personal opinion, I think was thrown in there to somewhat appease trying to change the mayoral term to 4 years. I think it was just that people may become more comfortable changing it 4 years if there was a term limit on 4 years. But history speaks for itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael Barbas.
Good evening, I'm Mike Barbas, 1 Cobra Drive. I just want to clarify one thing. I wear many hats, and one of these, I'm a taxing district commissioner, and the taxing districts were created by an act of the Connecticut State Legislature in 1913. And I've always been told they can't be touched. That can only be adjusted by an act of the Connecticut State Legislature, is what I've been told.
Yes, yes.
I'm here as I'm the secretary for the Norwalk Board of Education, and we have furnished General Counsel with a resolution that we've passed. And I'm just here to verbalize it, that the board unanimously voted to support that we think the current system of staggered elections with 4-year terms between district and at-large works incredibly well. And I have to say, I think it works so well, I would highly recommend it for the city council. Having been now through 2 turnovers since I was elected, you know, it really, the transition went very, very smoothly. And it really made I thought it's a very intelligent design that works very, very well. And I actually don't agree with Stuart Wells. I think the way to do it and to keep voter turnout up is when you don't have that top of the ticket, those alternate 2 years, that it should be the district elections for both the Board of Ed district and the Common Council district, because I think it's so local, you will get voter turnout and people will know who their representatives are, versus when it goes at large, you know, it isn't the same passion as there is for in-district candidates. And I have to say, I know my district representatives, and we've worked together on the elections, gotten voter turnout, we've fundraised together. One year we even talked about just having one PAC, or whatever they're called, one campaign between us, and I think I've seen that happen in other districts too.
May I just clarify, are you here as a citizen, as a commissioner, or as a Board of Education?
I really came here as a Board of Education member.
Thank you.
And I think I'm vocalizing what, I have a fellow member right here, Sherelle Harris. She's an at-large member, but I think we're all on the same page.
Mike, so to sum up, I saw, the resolution coming from the Board of Education, it's there. So you think that we should adopt with the City Council the way the Board of Education is right now? So it seems to be working for you. So to kind of summarize it up, we would do the mayor if we did the town clerk, and at large all at once, and then 2 years later, the in-district for the Board of Education and in-district council on a 4-year term.
That would be, yes.
That's your recommendation.
That would be my recommendation, just based on my personal experience.
Absolutely.
Having seen it work, and, the Board of Ed hasn't exactly been, the most congenial group at every moment, but it really has. I have to say, I'm really surprised how well it has worked.
In the continuity because of the staggered.
Exactly. And, like with this last election, three of our members turned over. The previous election, I guess it was 3 probably also. So it has led to a certain continuity, institutional memory. And I think if you go back, I don't know, I can't remember exactly, but there's no one's been on the board that long. There's no one who's been on the board for a dozen years or something like that. And I will say, just personally as a citizen, I do think term limits is a good idea. And I know there was a younger gentleman here earlier who said otherwise, but the president has term limits, and this business that you're a lame duck, well, you might decide not to run again. And you're going to retire, and you could be a lame, the mayor could sell for whoever candidate, council member, Board of Ed member, they could just decide they know they're not going to run again, and they could be a lame duck in their last term. So
are you advocating term limits for Board of Education members?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Across the board.
I don't want to serve for more than 8 years.
Just say no.
You know how hard that is, Jerry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lee Grant.
I'm Lee Grant. I live at 99 Comstock Hill Avenue, and I wrote you 2 letters, and I just wanted to read into the record a little bit of one of the letters. I need my techie here, your phone went up. I don't have the letter with me, and I can't paraphrase it, but it was the second letter that I wrote. And it's the description of the town planner, and also I would like to ask the council if it's my understanding that a town planner cannot be added without charter revision. Is that correct or incorrect? And do you know? If you don't know, I can wait. Sorry.
I'm so sorry, I'm focused. I have not received either letter.
All I
So if you could, please, resubmit those to, and send those to Barbara Tish's attention.
It looks like Mary has the letter. Mary has the letter. Is that the second one? Yes, okay.
When was this submitted?
I sent it to all of you. All your names are on it. I did not know that, so then I'll read you my letter. My understanding is that a town planner cannot be added without charter revision. I've thought about this a lot, but I think a partial solution is not going to solve this. Look at all the problems the city has encountered in the last couple of years. Some of them could have been, quote, headed off at the pass. I sat through the mosque public hearing. I was on the email list for White Barn. I sat through 2 presentations on TOD for South Norwalk, where redevelopment presented and P&Z added comments. This was on the mayor's task force for zoning, and then they all fell to fighting. We have known improper and inaccurate traffic studies for Main Street by developers for Dunkin' Donuts and CVS, and BJ's, had we not defeated it for the time being, was another. We have more coming out of Glover, and that's just my part of town. We have a huge area around Main Street that was identified by DEEP as needing further study following identification of the contaminated groundwater from Malenko. I read the minutes for conservation. They don't even review the 10-year reports on the cleanup operations, and they represent the Inland Wetlands Aquifer Authority for Norwalk. The cleanup on that Superfund site, according to DEP, will take over 250 years. That's the tip of the iceberg, and my own limited participation in only these issues. There are so many more. And I would like to say now that I disagree with Diane that you need to do another study. I don't think we have the talent in PNC to move someone up to a town planner, because all these people have been working within a certain division of duties, and that's the way they think. And lastly, this is the definition of urban planning. Urban planning is a technical and political process concerned with the use of land, protection and use of the environment, public welfare, and the design of the urban environment, including air, water, and the infrastructure passing into and out of urban areas, such as transportation, communications, and distribution networks. Urban planning is also referred to as urban and regional, regional, town, city, rural planning, or some combination in various areas worldwide. Urban planning takes many forms, and it can share perspectives and practices with urban design. Urban planning guides and ensures the orderly development of settlements and satellite communities which commute into and out of urban areas or share resources with it. Urban planners in the field are concerned with research and analysis, strategic thinking, architecture, urban design, public cognate fields of architecture, landscape architecture, civil engineering, and public administration to achieve strategic policy and sustainability goals. Early urban planners were often members of these cognate fields. Today, urban planning is a separate, independent, professional discipline. The discipline is the broader category that includes many different subfields such as land use planning, zoning, environment planning, transportation planning, and parks and recreation. There is no one looking at the whole picture. Part of that is due to the division of duties. It's time there was. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? The reason that submissions go to Barbara Tisha is first of all, so they can be logged in and become part of a public record. And if you send it to me with my law firm address, I'm sure it went into some type of a spam.
Okay.
So I don't have them, and I really want them.
Did it?
So
Well, I know
got it.
Glenn got it, and Jerry got it.
But in the future, if you could submit it to anything you have to.
Is that
to Barbara.
on the website, on your?
Yes, it's there. I've been clear with the working press as well, that all submissions need to go to Barbara's attention.
I will resend
I
it.
would be grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else while we're here? Please.
Hello, I'm Geraldo Williams from 62 Main Street here in Norwalk.
And your address, sir, so we can have that?
I just had 62 Main Street, B-A-Y-N.
Thank you very much.
And I'll sign it. Since I'm here, like I said, also support changing the mayoral term to a 4-year term, and support what Mr. Mike Barber said earlier of having both the Board of Education to continue with cycles of at-large and in-district. As someone who has campaigned as a candidate of Board of Ed in both unsuccessfully, but I still think it's a very effective way of enabling continuity on an important board as the Board of Ed. I think that would add value also on the City Council having the continuity between the two terms. That's it.
Anyone? Questions? Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for that. Well, thank you for coming tonight and sharing with us your thoughts and your concerns, and for raising new issues, and for your submissions. And please do not be silent. We welcome your contributions. Our next meeting, which is not a public hearing, is on, as I mentioned, the 22nd of this month at 6:30. And at that time, I know we'll be setting a new date for a public hearing. So, please.
I'd just like to add, I'm on this commission, but I was also in another seat 2 years ago on the council side of trying to put together a charter revision commission. And I can tell you some of the difficulties that we had a couple years ago. This body has an awful lot of power by charter. Once this thing has been commissioned by the council, a lot of the things that you said we can do, yeah, we can do. But let me just back up a little bit. It took a supermajority by the Common Council to put this charter together. Something 2 years ago I could not do, or last year at least as the council president, because there's a lot of power here. One thing we wanted to make sure from the council standpoint, that when we put this body together, that we wouldn't venture too far from the directives that the council has asked us to look into. Can we deviate from that? Yes, we can. But where is a check and balance system? Because whatever we put together in our deliberations, and believe me, we're listening to everything that you said, we have to put together our recommendations, vote on it, and it goes back to the council. Now, not so much the onus on the council at this point, because it's not a supermajority needed to adopt these resolutions. It just takes a simple majority. In this case, that would be 8 votes if all 15 are there. So we do still answer to the council. One of the things that I can stress, not to throw the ball in the council's court, is that you might want to reach out to your council representative. There was a councilman here that brought something truly earlier this evening outside of what the council charges with, and this was to look into changing the parking structure for calf pasture, and so what I guess the way I want to sum this up, and then of course, if the council passes what we come up with, it ultimately rests with the voters. All I'm asking you is to reach out to your council, because I know I will be talking to my council people on both sides of the aisle, and for some direction of what they'd like to see from us too. So, but thank you so much, and we've all took notes, and it should be interesting, February 22nd.
Anyone else want to say something?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Brad Schmidt. I'm from District B. I live at 23 North Main Street. I'd like to support the recommendation that the mayor wants for 4 years. As many of you who know me know, I work with the Democrats in election time. And it's a shame that, you know, when you get elected as mayor or town councilman and you get things moving, it takes you about a year to get things moving. And then halfway through your second year, you got to start campaigning again if you want to run again. I feel that 4 years would give a man time, or a woman, excuse me, ladies, time to implement their ideas and to get them off the ground without worrying about being reelected. I've been involved in Norwalk politics for a long time. I don't want to say how long, but a long time. And what I find is that the people of Norwalk, and many people have chimed in and said this, if they don't like you, you're out. I've worked on a couple of campaigns and we sat there and cried because people were, you know, dismissed by the public. As far as the community, well, the community person that everybody keeps talking about, yeah, that would work. But he needs to staff, organizers, and to go out and find out what each community needs, and not focusing on one community. I was a community outreach worker and organizer for the city of Norwalk. You do need a staff to go out and take care of these things, to find out the heartbeat of the city. One person cannot do it. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, any questions? Oh, sorry. I'm not used to that.
No, I say if there were any questions from the commission.
No, thank you.
No, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
If you'd like to, go right ahead.
Just curious, I'm going to make a motion that the public hearing is now closed, whether or not the Robert's rules will need to.
Robert's rules, yeah. Second. Can we have a show of hands? Thank you. Thank you for tonight. Thank you, Mario.